Everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. We're glad you're here to the webinar series where we bring you thought-provoking presentations from leaders across our industry, across a broad spectrum of OTT-related topics. Today, we're excited to have with us Russ Krupnick. He's from MusicWatch, and he's the managing partner at MusicWatch. He's also president at Media Insights. Both firms are research companies aimed at understanding consumers' interactions with media and entertainment and the factors that drive consumption. Russ is a veteran consumer researcher and founded the entertainment practice of the NPD Group. He has a global reputation for insights in the music and home entertainment industries and is regularly quoted in Billboard and Variety, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and other leading outlets. Russ has also been a great partner to OTT.X and EMA over the years, participating in many of our events and conferences, sharing valuable research and insights. We thank you, Russ, for that and for joining us once again today. I know we're looking forward to his presentation today entitled, What Are We Watching Tonight? So with that, I'll turn it over to Russ Krupnick from MusicWatch. Russ, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks to all the folks at OTT.X for yet another invitation. I was counting. I think it's been 16 or 17 years that we've been working together, back from the physical days to the digital days to all the variations of VOD, and it's good to be back. Let me just put up my my screen for a second. Take a moment to do that. There we go. Perfect. What I want to spend, we'll probably take about a half hour of going through the presentation. What I wanted to spend the time doing was talking with you about the market for music live streaming, which is a little bit off of the typical course for the things that we've done with OTT.X. But I thought there were some findings in the research that were worthwhile sharing to everybody in the community. So let me take a few minutes, walk you through this, and then we'll have some time for questions or comments if there are any. I don't know about you, but I think certainly this whole COVID pandemic situation has changed the kind of questions. I know I always have this dialogue with my wife. The questions are typically three important questions. What flight are you taking? Where are you playing golf this weekend, and where are we going out to dinner? And obviously all of those have been replaced by a new set of questions. Here are the things we're always talking about. Where can we find Clorox wipes? Whether or not I forgot to take my mask. Do we have enough toilet paper? Do we have to queue up to find some of that? If you're in New York, as we are, the really big question is, what time is Como on? But the super big question every single night is, what are we actually going to watch? And not surprisingly, I think everybody knows this, you're all experiencing this, that this pandemic has really changed the whole media landscape. Let me just share with you a couple of statistics to show you how dramatically changes in behavior have impacted what's going on with our media consumpsion. If you start all the way over on the left side, we ask people a whole variety of questions about how's your life changing as a result of the COVID-19 situation. So, you know, are people spending less time in public transportation? Well, of people who took public transportation, nearly 2/3 of them are spending less time. And if you think about that, that has an impact on things like on-the-go music listening. Right? All of those people, if you're in New York anyway, and you're on the subways, all those people with earbuds listening to Spotify, all of that consumption is gone. You've got, moving over one bar, you've got 144 million people saying that they're staying home most of the time. And as you all know, and you've all probably read, that's had a direct impact on a couple of things. We see gaming up a lot. We see SVOD consumption up a lot. We see platforms like TikTok, which 9 months ago were very niche among, Gen Z more young ladies. Now you've got baby boomers who are actively engaging in TikTok as a way to kind of get away from all of what's going on in the world. Just go down to the bar that has 91 million in it. That's the number of people who say that they're spending much less time in a car. It's had a tremendous impact on radio, for example. And radio is getting damaged in two ways. Number one, you've got fewer people listening in their cars, which is where most of the radio consumption happens these days. And then secondarily, you've got all of the local advertisers who are holding back on spending. So, while certain formats of entertainment, like SVOD, like gaming, like TikTok, have done very well, others have really been damaged throughout the COVID routine. And I think if you go all the way over to the right, what's interesting is not even 1 out of 5, only 18% said, and this is for second quarter of 2020, only about 18% said that their routine was about the same. So, hopefully during the summer, we kind of broke out of this a little bit, but we have some questions about whether or not we're all going to start locking down as the weather gets cooler. So, one of the formats that's really been impacted the most when you think about music consumption is live music. Obviously, all of the venues have been shut down. Virtually all of the venues have been shut down. Touring has just come to an absolute standstill. So one of the ways that people were consuming music in a very niche mode, only very few people were doing it, was through live streams. What's happened during the pandemic is we've seen an absolute explosion in the number of people who are accessing live streams and in the amount of content. Artists and this is, a big average because you've got baby bands and then you've got the Rolling Stones on the other side, but on average about 60% of their income comes from live touring. And since that's been entirely cut out, a lot of them have transitioned to live streaming. So not only do you have a larger audience, but you also have more content that's being put out there. So we asked people whether or not they were actually viewing live streams, and you'll see two numbers here. The 140 million is just anybody who viewed any live stream format during second quarter of 2020, and it's about 140 million. That's over half of the internet using population who are 13 and older. So just to, by contrast, if you think about podcasts, which have been a really big deal over the past couple of years, podcasts are used on average by about maybe 25, 30%. So live streams actually even shot by podcast consumption in terms of the audience. And if you ask them, did you watch at least one day, 1 hour in the past week? Just to kind of refine that down, it's something that we use in media research to kind of say, did you listen for at least 15 minutes? Did you listen for at least an hour? Did you watch for at least 30 minutes? It still gets you an audience of about 113 million. So the study that we conducted was to understand what's going on with this audience. What are their usage habits? What are their motivations? What platforms are they using? And most importantly, is this a format that could potentially be monetized? And is it going to stick around? I mean, hopefully at some point we'll all break out of our homes and get back to whatever the new normal is. Is this format going to be sticky at all, or is it just one of those things that are going to transition? So, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The reason why I actually reached out to Mark Fisher was something caught my attention in the data. And I thought that this was a real opportunity for the video on demand platforms. Typically when we think about music, we think about things like Spotify. You see a lot of music on TikTok. A lot of us have used Pandora through years, and certainly YouTube. But what was interesting is that we asked respondents, it was the very last thing that we asked them, pick out one place where you could actually view live stream of music performances which one would it be? Not surprisingly, YouTube was at the top, but right tucked in under YouTube was Netflix. So more people said that they wanted to watch music live streams on Netflix than said on Spotify or Apple Music or Instagram, which has been, heavily promoting live streams, or even TikTok. I mean, TikTok Netflix beat TikTok by a factor of 4. And it kind of got me thinking that if you take a look at what's available on the SVOD platforms, I mean, there may be concert films, there may be music documentaries, but there's not live streaming. And it occurred to me that this is a really big opportunity for the video on demand platforms to get into an area that has certainly taken off within the past 6 months. And as we go through this, I'll talk about what I think some of the potential benefits are for any VOD kind of platform taking a look at live streaming of music. One other thing is, it also reaches, if you ask people about which platforms that they want, Netflix, other SVOD platforms would really be capable of capturing that very valuable 25 to 34. It's mostly millennials in that age group, who are heavy viewers, and increasingly we see them spending more and more on music content. So, a generation ago, we would have talked about music wants to be free, content wants to be free. Nowadays, when we take a look at millennials, they actually want to pay for content. They'd much prefer to pay for Spotify or Apple or pay for a live stream than be inconvenienced by having to go and spend a half hour finding it for free. So it's a really juicy target audience that wants to see these performances on the SVOD platforms. The other big advantage that I think came through on live streaming is the amount of engagement. I always talk about, we have so many different platforms that we can use for music, for gaming, for TV shows, for movies. The whole trick these days is, how do you keep engagement strong on your particular platform? And I thought the stats were really interesting when we asked people about how much time they're spending with live streaming. On average, a live streamer was spending, and this was also for second quarter, these live streamers were spending about 3.5 days per week with at least one viewing session. So they're doing it on a fairly regular basis. And when they do it, it is sticky. They're spending about an hour of viewing live streams every single day. So if you do a little bit of math and say, well, how many hours per week does that net me? It's 3.8. Now, that doesn't say that your platform would necessarily get all 4 of those hours, but if you think about it, if you've got 10 hours of viewing TV and movies, and you could add another 2 hours of viewing music live stream, that's immediately a 20% increase in the amount of engagement that you have. So very, very strong stats in terms of audience, very strong stats in terms of engagement. But what's interesting is that if you ask people where they're watching now, as I said before, you can't find this kind of content on the video on demand services. You ask them where they actually watch, and here they could pick multiples, because you can watch something on YouTube or Facebook or on Apple Music, and you can see YouTube is really the strongest platform, followed by Facebook, followed by the music streaming services. A lot of people, and this is especially true for the older demographic, have been watching the live streams when they're on broadcast TV or on cable. And then you have Instagram and TikTok and Twitch. But you see that the video on demand platforms don't even show up, don't even register as being options here. So again, I thought that was yet another opportunity. In terms of the kinds of content, what I like about, if I were to think about this as from a platform perspective, what I really like about it is the variety. You're not locked into one particular kind of format or genre of of performance. We asked about a whole variety. I'm only showing you the top two, but about 40% watched a live stream of a full-length concert from one artist or band. About 41% watched a live stream of artists playing, talking, doing other things from their home. And I mean, an example of that is Ringo put on an 80th birthday show, and he had Joe Walsh. They played a little bit of music. They showed some videos. People wished him happy birthday. So it doesn't have to necessarily be straight music. It doesn't have to be a concert like we're used to going and seeing live. You know, it can be in essence the current form of a 70s variety show. Other kinds of things that they're interested in: concerts with multiple bands, virtual festivals, DJ sets, concert clips and highlights. So the point is, if you're thinking about this from a production standpoint, you don't necessarily have to go get the Rolling Stones to do an hour-long concert. You could do any kind of variety is finding some attraction with different audiences of music fans. The other thing that's interesting is, even though we call it live stream, it doesn't necessarily have to be live. While about, roughly about 60% of those two top genres were actually live, or at least respondents believe that they were actually being broadcast live. For example, tonight our local newspaper is putting on a performance with Blue Oyster Cult, who's a local Long Island. They came locally from Long Island. But it can also be a rebroadcast. About, again, just rounding a little bit, about a third of the content was rebroadcast. The interesting thing about the rebroadcast to me is, depending upon what budgets look like, you don't necessarily have to go all the way to 10 with spending money. You can purchase rights for a rebroadcast. And the other point about acquiring content is, if any of you have either been involved with sync or been involved with licensing music, it's like battling an octopus. Depending upon what territory you're in, or what labels you're working with, or what kind of artist it is, the licensing of music is incredibly complex. The reality is that live streaming is actually simpler than licensing traditional kinds of music, catalog music, and it's also going to be less expensive. So if you wanted to add music to the platform, you don't have to go and do what a Spotify did or what an Apple Music did. The live streams give you a way to do it easier and more economically. In terms of genres, we asked a whole variety of genres. I just grabbed a couple of them. I'll just tell you overall, these look at two different age groups to show the contrast between 25 to 34-year-olds and 45 to 65-year-olds. But I will tell you the most popular, and this is actually true when we look at a lot of listening data, the most popular genre to live stream was actually rock. Again, not surprising given what we see in terms of rock's overall popularity. You'll hear a lot about hip hop being tops on the Spotify charts, but if you take a look at the broad spectrum of how people really like to listen, it's still rock. And for somebody of my era, I'm glad to see it's still classic rock. But you could see that the point that I wanted to make is, depending upon how you wanted to target, in terms of an audience, depending upon who the audience was for your particular platform, you can go in any number of directions. If you tend to have a younger audience, or you want to attract a younger audience, or you want to do a kind of a sponsorship partner deal, certainly that gives you the opportunity to work with hip hop artists. If you wanted to go to an older audience, there's always classic rock. But if you take a look at country also skews a little bit older as well. So the point being is that you can reach any kind of audience that you want, because you've got all different kind of formats that people are listening to, everything from full live concerts to DJ sets, and B, you've got all of these different music genres that you can work with. So For me, it always comes down to monetization. I mean, can we make money doing this? We asked a lot of questions about monetization and payment. Here, this is just boiled down a lot because there's a lot of different ways that you can monetize live streams. Everything from, you know, an a la carte payment to, as you know, people are driving to mall centers and watching live streams on a screen. So we asked about all of those. I just boiled down a couple of them. I think the key thing was that we found that about 1/3 of live streamers were actually willing to pay for a music live stream. And if you break down the people who are willing to pay, some of the things that might be relevant for this audience, if you package something up like a pay-per-view or an iVod, about 1/3 were willing to pay for that. And they said, you know, hey, on average, we'll pay about $13. If you added it as an additional fee to a streaming service, that was about 38%. And it came up to about $6.50 additional a month. And I'll come back to that price point in a second. What about if we put together something as a specific bundle and you had a monthly or an annual subscription? That also had appeal to about 40% and a price point at about $15 per month. So one comment that I just want to make about pricing, and if you've ever heard me talk about, over the years, if you've ever heard me talk about, you know, consumers research and pricing, I think there's two things. You know, people typically tend to overstate their willingness to pay. There's a difference between saying, hey, I think that's a really good idea, I'd be interested in paying, and actually whipping out your credit card and making the payment. So you have to be a little bit cautious. If you were to say, you know, 31% of 113 million live streamers, let's just for argument's sake, let's say there's 40 million people who are willing to pay. Just be a little cautious with that number, because there'll be some people who will fall off when you actually ask them to go ahead and make the payment. The other thing about the amount that they'd be willing to pay is, I find it frankly hard to believe that somebody who's paying $9.99 for Spotify or $9.99 for Netflix would actually pay another $6-7 a month to add live streaming to their streaming service. And we looked at all the services individually, and it all hovers around $6-7. I find that really hard to believe, but I do think, I think the point is that you could add this for maybe $2 per month and probably have a fairly good reaction from the consumers who are willing to pay. So the key takeaway here is, I do think that there are monetization opportunities. While a lot of live streams are out there free, I think over the long term, this is something that could be turned into incremental revenue. Let me just touch on the motivation for viewing the live stream. And this is what we asked, a whole series of questions. I'm only showing you the top 5. We asked them, why are you actually watching this? And what's interesting is that the #1 answer was, you know, I'm just kind of tired of watching movies or TV shows. I loved watching Fauda, but there's only so much Fauda that you can watch. And it's nice to take a break and kind of reach out and be able to see artists that you might be missing because they're not touring at the moment, or find a new music artist that you like, or you know, see something from a benefit, and just take a break from, you know, what episode are we on Top of the Lake, which is that's the question of the week in our house. So it provides a break. But the other thing behind this little data point that I saw is that it feels to me that this is not necessarily substitutional for what you might have in terms of movies or TV shows. It's complementary, right? So I like to watch movies, I like to watch TV shows, and just for a change of pace, you know, I may throw in a concert or two. Other things that I think are great about live streams is that people who don't go to a lot of concerts, or people who don't necessarily have the money to go see them, or if they're not touring in that particular area, those were also reasons that people would hop on to a live stream as well. So I think there's a lot of solid reasons, but for me, the key takeaway was, I think that this can be complementary to other programming, other formats on the platforms. So who's doing it? everybody's doing it. In terms of ages, if you take a look at the distribution, you see everything from younger people, 13 to 24-year-olds, are about a quarter. 45 plus is also about a quarter if you add the 13% and the 11%, and everything in between. So as I said, I think it has the ability to reach a wide variety of age demographics, and then you can use the different kinds of live streams and the different music formats to target specific audiences. What's interesting is if you take a look at people who are very frequent live streamers, they tend to skew 35 to 44. If you want to add in, you can get like 25 to 44. So you really get a nice demographic group in there that's highly targetable, also very highly appealing to advertisers. The other thing that I forgot to mention is the one thing that's interesting about promoting live streams is that you don't have to do quite as much because the artists are promoting what they're doing all the time on social media and fans are following them. So some of the actual promotion or the customer acquisition, the viewer acquisition, is organic because the artists themselves are all the time out there promoting whatever their latest project is. The other thing, again, depending on what kind of demos you're targeting, if you're going after that frequent live streamer, even though they do skew male a little bit, the average live streamer is pretty much 50-50 male, female. So you're going to track both genders. But the frequent live streamer tends to have higher income and is a little bit better educated. So again, if you're doing this with an advertising bent, you do have a pretty good target audience to talk to your advertisers about. So what comes next with this? I think a couple of things. You know, if you taking over a look at the left, if you take a look at a Post Malone, who hopefully very shortly will be back touring again, I actually think what's going to happen is that some of, you know, for the most popular artists, there'll be less live streaming because they'll get back to life as usual. But I think while they're in between tours or while they're working on projects, this is going to be a really terrific way to keep in touch with fans. The same way that they've been using social media the past couple of years, I think live streaming is going to be another arrow in the quiver of how do you stay in touch with fans. The two young men in the middle are from Nashville. They're the Clementi brothers. The band is CB30. They've been out for a couple of years, which is hard to believe because I don't think either one of them are 20 years old yet. But you know, here's a way where they can use live streaming to start to even build an audience. And if you take a look over all the way over on the right, I think increasingly what we're going to see is concerts or festivals that have typically been a kind of an on-site event. You'll see people starting to monetize those more by putting them on all of these platforms. So I think there's all different kinds of opportunities. I will say when you take a look at the data, what's interesting is that if I had to forecast, I would say when everything goes back to normal, my guess is live streaming is going to fall off by maybe 30 to 40%. There'll be a lot of people who, they can either go to the shows or they get back to work or get back to life as usual. So I don't think live streaming is going to be at the levels that we're seeing now. But even at 60-70% of the levels that we're seeing now for audience engagement, I think it's still going to be a really valuable format to pursue. So let me just wrap this up and be happy to take some questions. As I mentioned, I think the opportunity for music live streams partially comes in the fact that there is tremendous reach. There's a pre-existing audience of fans that are really easily reached by social media. The engagement is incremental to the things that they're doing now. It's incremental to the music listening that they typically do. It's incremental to the TV and movie watching that they do. As I said before, I suspect that it tends to be complementary to movie and TV programming. It's certainly complementary to the live experience, especially for people who can't get to a show, either logistically or economically. They can't afford the tickets. This is another way to stay in with the experience. Outside of YouTube, there's really no winning platform. Typically what we'll see is a large, somebody kind of winning the race in all of the various platforms, whether it's gaming, TV, movies, or music. But besides YouTube, I think this is kind of wide open for somebody to take the number 2 and number 3 spots as being able to offer terrific live stream experiences. As I mentioned, it's not simple, but it's less costly and less complicated than your typical music licensing. It's very highly targetable, depending upon what format you want to put out. I'm certainly not of the demo that would be interested in DJ sets, but my daughters would be. You can reach different demographics, and with all of the genres of music, that gives you a lot of flexibility when you're targeting audiences. As I said, there's potential for monetization, perhaps not quite as much monetization as our respondents thought, but a lot of monetization nonetheless. And I think there's also a lot of startups in the middle of this whole pandemic. We're hearing every week there's a new startup doing live streaming, either in the production area or the platform area. They're all looking for partners to get the content out there. But as I said, I think it's likely to contract a little bit post-COVID, but I still think it's going to be a really interesting business going forward. So if you'd like more information, I know this is being recorded, or you can reach out to Mark and his team. Please reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to discuss the findings with you. We do have a report. If you're interested in purchasing the report, we'll give you the friends and family discount on that, or any of the work that we've got over at MusicWatch. And that's it. Let me thank you all, thank OTT.X, and I'd be happy to take some questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Russ. That was fascinating. I'm a big music fan. I love going to shows. Sadly, the last one I was able to go to, actually, I had tickets for a couple of shows that got canceled. So I was kind of bummed I didn't get to go catch some of my favorite artists. But you have given me a great excuse to upgrade my audio components.
All right.
I got another maybe another way that I can see if I can get some better gear. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. We do have a couple of questions. First of all,
Sure.
Here's something from Tom Schwack. This is a really interesting question, Tom. Thank you. Do you see any future in VR live music and concerts? So Keek is doing something like this. If you
absolutely. We didn't get into it in the study, but I think if you take a look, just following what's happening in the music space, I think the area of VR is going to be another one that really burgeons over the next few years. As kind of a complement to live streaming. You've even got folks out there who are doing hologram kind of work. I know I've seen the Zappa family talk a few times about, and I have a colleague, I teach at NYU, I have a colleague there who manages Roy Orbison's estate. They're working on things so that they can do holographic, if that's the correct word, kinds of concerts. So I think, besides your basic sitting in your living room strumming a guitar, I think the formats are going to be really, really interesting over the next couple of years.
Super cool. Maybe it's a way for music to kind of make a comeback in terms of its kind of relevance in people's living rooms and lives. It's kind of turned into something that we have on in the car, as you said, or it's in the background, but people don't sit down and put on a record. I mean, some people do, but a lot of people don't,
when I talk to my class about what I did when I was in high school and college, they look at me like, you actually sat for 3 hours and watched speakers go in and out and read liner notes. So yeah, they don't.
There's little meters also on your amp that went like that.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. And
Cool.
and then I got on my horse and yeah.
All right. Well, another question from Tom. Thanks, Tom. And that is, who are some of the artists that you see kind of doing this the most?
Wow. It's hard to get into particular names. I'll tell you kind of an interesting. I'll answer the question, but in an interesting way. I have a friend who manages 3 very well-known kind of classic rock artists, and 2 of the 3 are not doing any live streams because they're such perfectionists that they're concerned that, if somebody drops a chord or breaks a string or something like that. So, I think, as I mentioned, I think, anybody who's not touring can do it, but there seems to be this bifurcation of artists who are very casual about sharing their work versus those who are kind of on the perfectionist end and worry about the production and have issues with the audio. Even though most consumers thought the audio and video quality was pretty good. So without naming names, that's kind of a different tack on your answer.
What ticket prices are you seeing for these types of one-off events, like a concert from a particular artist?
I've seen everything from a few dollars, because some of it is coming through venues. For example, in New York, I'm a big fan of the Blue Note. I think their live streams are relatively inexpensive, probably under $20. So I think I think the price point is probably going to be $30 and under just for a general. It's different if we pack up a car and go to a mall and watch something on a screen, or there's a kind of a special event. I've seen those for over $100.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's live concerts that have terrible quality too. Some of the old speaker sets and PA systems they have in some of the halls are awful. So, I mean, the quality is often, I would think, better in somebody's home in terms of the sound quality you can get.
Yeah, and it depends. Some artists have the equivalent of a recording studio in their home, and all kinds of great kit. Other artists have less. I think part of it is, my guess is that consumers are willing to give up a little of the audio and video quality just for the experience. One of the interesting things that comes across in a lot of our music research is consumers like to get closer to the artists. So if they're hearing about, like, how did you come up with that melody, or they're watching them do something in the studio, that has just as much value as something that sounds like the London Symphony.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that, when you go to a live show, it's really fun to hear, some of the stories that an artist would have related to some of the content or their pieces.
I think the cool thing about live streams is you don't have somebody in front of you holding up their phone and blocking your.
That drives me nuts. It really does. Yeah, it's interesting. There's so much. I'm really interested in this topic, but what do you find is the kind of the duration that folks are spending watching this kind of is it more of a destination where we'll make some popcorn or something and we'll park ourselves in front of the TV with our audio setup and watch a show, or is it like kind of in between things, I'll turn something on?
Well, if you take a look at the average listening time, it's 62 minutes. So it's an hour. People are making a commitment to things. And I think certainly the way that they're being marketed, I know Pandora did something a week or so ago with the Killers. You get an invite from Pandora, you're getting a reminder, you're getting a link, and it is being made to be an event or a destination kind of thing, as opposed to just stuff, as opposed to how we often go on the video on demand platforms and just look for things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a different way of discovering content, and that's something that people might have to get kind of used to.
Right.
Like planning to watch something at a certain time.
Well, what's happening with music discovery is increasingly coming from the social media platforms. So if I'm following somebody on Instagram or Twitter, I know that, take the Clementi brothers. If I'm following the Clementi brothers, I know, because I've got their feeds. I know that they're doing a live stream on Friday, or I know that they're putting out a song, or they're doing a collaboration with Keith Urban, or whatever's going on, because I'm tuned into everything that they're doing.
So is that how this content is kind of getting promoted mostly? Is you don't have concert promoters so much, you don't have managing organizations that are promoting. It's really something the artists can kind of do themselves?
Yes, it looks like the artist is doing themselves, but I know from talking to a manager just a week, the managers, this is what they're spending all their time doing. Right. And in fact, one of them said to me, because I have more time since I'm not actually on the road, I can make sure all of this content is going out. So while it's going out under her artist's name, yeah, there's a factory behind it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But still, if you're a smaller artist, and you can do a lot of this yourself, I would think as well. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we're going to wrap things up here. It was fascinating talk. Thanks so much, Russ. I'm really. Oh, one thing I thought of actually. What about, you mentioned a little bit about the demo, and it is a very appealing demo from an advertising standpoint. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing much traction in AVOD? We talk about AVOD a lot in the OTT world. Do you see much opportunity for AVOD for concerts?
Yeah, again, that's when I was looking at when the raw data was coming through, and I looked at that question about where do you want to view these, even though we asked about the SVOD platforms, to me, I think that the video platforms, including AVOD, have a great opportunity here. Because as I said, I don't see, leaving YouTube aside, I don't see it kind of anybody winning the war yet in terms of where all of this content is going to be. You're certainly not seeing it on the music streaming platforms where you might expect it. So I think this is a great opportunity for either the larger or the smaller AVOD platforms.
Yeah, I thought that venues have kind of a brand associated with them a lot of times, and I wonder if that's an opportunity for a venue that is obviously having a really hard time attracting or putting on an event for. I live in Seattle, and there's a famous club downtown called the Crocodile, and that's where Nirvana played and a bunch of other kind of important rock bands, I guess, that came out of Seattle. And I think that I would trust the Crocodile as an example if they had a live streaming channel to be putting on concerts and bringing in artists that I'd want to see.
It's interesting and I'm not an advertising expert, but it's interesting that I think what's happened with brand partnerships are increasingly a bigger and bigger piece of the music. It used to be, I just want to make my music, and I don't want to deal with the man, right? That kind of 60s counterculture thing. Well, now it's quite the opposite, especially in hip hop. It's like the first thing that you want to do is develop a clothing line, and then maybe I will make some music.
We'll figure out the rest later.
Right. And the challenge during the pandemic has been that brands are frozen, right? Because they with the exception of saying, let's support first responders, or please be safe, brands kind of don't know what to do right now. So a lot of these brand partnership budgets are frozen. But if you have artists or venues that the brand can support, it's a way of getting at that budget without kind of staking out a position or being kind of politically correct at a time when people have sensitivities about how brands are promoting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you if you were to if you were to do a Red Hot Chili Pepper concert, people would say, that's great, that's a lot of fun. I'm glad Dunkin' Donuts did that concert. I love them because it gave me an hour away from all of this, where's the toilet paper, where's the mask nonsense. So
Maybe
I
we
think
should
this
try
is
that.
actually a
It's one of
really
our
unique
ideas.
time for brands to
Maybe we
do
can
it.
get some product placement sponsorship for
Yeah.
the OTT.X webinars. All right. Well, thanks again, Russ. Super fascinating. Really enjoyed it. And I want to thank everybody for jumping on with us today to this edition of the Wednesday webinar series. As always, we recorded this and it's going to be available on the OTT.X YouTube channel. So check it out. PowerPoint's also going to be out on our site and available for OTT.X members. I want to also invite everybody to join us on October 21st for the next in our series. It's a presentation from Blue Digital. You can register to attend that and other sessions in the future. I'm going to put the link out on the chat so y'all can do that. Also remind everybody about upcoming OTT.X events, including our very popular roundtable discussion groups. That's going to be on October 28th. It's an OTT.X members only event where you can engage in discussions with others in the industry, sharing knowledge, issues, and solutions about important OTT related topics. Check it out. After that, on December 9th and 10th, the OTT.X at Pipeline Digital, at Digital Media Pipeline with our inaugural OTT.X Impact Awards. So both of the events are going to be online this year, so register for those soon. So stay tuned for more information about both of these events. You can learn more about all of our events and upcoming conferences at the OTT.X.org website, at the OTT.X website. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all very soon.